Welcome everybody to episode number 3 of Memory Card, your retro nostalgia video game conversation show. This is a show that is produced by the good folks over at Color Break, and it's presented by our good friends over at the Nerd Initiative. Be sure to check out their website and their YouTube channel. Lots of cool stuff over there. But I'm here with a very special guest, one of my good buddies. I feel comfortable calling you a good buddy nowadays. We've got Drew Deficit. Um, before I throw it to Drew, just so you guys know, Drew is a teacher by day, but then he is a comic book content creator. He's also a video game writer and a comic book writer by night. Give it up for Drew. What's up, buddy?
I am a man of many hats, as they say.
That's true, but not so many hats that it doesn't cover up your nice hair, dude. I gotta compliment your nice haircut that I know you just got.
I appreciate that. I like to keep it every 3 weeks on the dot, getting that haircut. I gotta keep something looking nice.
Nice, dude. Yeah, no, listen, I don't want to get too much into it, but I just got a haircut too. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Got to throw on the Nerd Initiative hat, but sometimes that's how it is. But before we get into it, guys, I just want to remind you, share this episode with your friend. Make sure to give it a like. And if you want a longer conversation with Drew about a special experience that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit, Drew writing a DC video game, be sure to check out our episode, Color Break Comic Book Podcast, and listen to Drew talk about that. But yeah, I'll give it to Drew. Why don't you talk about just a little bit about your experience, like I said, writing a DC game?
So yeah, I mean, very short, since I already, I want everybody to go listen to the other podcast we did where I get into the details. But I was approached by a developer who kind of knew that I had a lot of experience with DC, enough to be able to actually really flesh out versions of characters, and they asked me if I'd write a video game, and I did. And then it came out in March, and it's called DC Justice League Cosmic Chaos. It's for kids. It's like a dungeon crawler. Basically, think of baby's first Diablo, but it's super goofy and really funny. It has a lot of heart, I think. This is what the reviewers say too, so I guess it's not just me. But yeah, I mean, it's if you are a fan of the DC universe, there is a lot for you to like in there.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree with Drew there. I've been playing that game. It's a ton of fun. Definitely check it out. But yeah, Drew, you know what? Let's just start the show, man. Let's go. Let's take it all the way back. Let's hit the rewind button. Tell me about your first console.
You like that backwards talking? My first console. I cannot remember what year it was, but for Christmas one year I got an NES, and I was so little at the time that I didn't know what an NES was. I didn't know what the Nintendo was at all.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And so I was just, my brother, he's a little bit older than I am. He must have had friends who had a Nintendo or something like that, and so he was really excited about it, and that was my introduction to video games. I literally did not know that video games existed before I got that Nintendo.
Nice. So was it like a combined present, like you and your brother, you gotta split time with it and share it, or?
I'm sure that it was. Again, I mean, I was really little when I got that Nintendo. It was pre-kindergarten.
Gotcha. Yep.
So, and I mean, the Nintendo came out in '85. I was born in '87. This would have been '93, I think. So it was late into the Nintendo's life, but and I remember. I mean, I remember playing Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. I have a whole. I mean, we don't have enough time to get into it, but I've gone on entire rants about why Mario Brothers is such an important piece of not just video game history, but I think it's an important piece of cultural history.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, I'm sure there are other people who can articulate that way and who know way more than I do and can say it way better. But you know, like when I get on my soapbox in front of my students at school and we're talking about video games, and they know Mario as a character, but they don't really have as much experience with like the original Super Mario Brothers, and don't really understand like why that game is such an achievement in game design. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I think so you got the it sounds like you might have gotten like the pack-in game, right? The Mario Duck Hunt like
Yeah, yeah,
combo
it
card.
was the split one. It wasn't the one with the track and field, but it was the you know Mario Duck Hunt. No track and field attached to it, but and so I got
Nice.
the orange zapper.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, and I can remember like certain games that I had for the NES. I remember buying Castlevania at like a flea market, I think. Um, I remember having I didn't have a lot of games
Gotcha.
because I was I was so little again that like I didn't know where to find out. Like, how do you find out about video games in 1993 when you're like 5 years old?
Yeah.
It was just from like hearing about it from other people, I guess. But I mean, I can remember like I knew of Mega Man. I had a flight simulator game that I can't remember the title of. I just remember that it was on a gold cart and it had the little switch on the back. Uh,
Okay, yep.
if I did some googling, I could definitely find it, but it's not important. But yeah, I mean that was my first experience with video games, and like I was so young that I wasn't like I didn't really live around other kids my age, so I spent a lot of time playing video games, and
Right.
that kept that was it was a thing that I knew I liked, and then that just continued throughout my life.
So kind of segueing to one of your favorite game franchises of all time, right? When we're talking about Final Fantasy, did you play like any of the early like NES Final Fantasies?
I did not until they were ported over to the PlayStation 1
Gotcha.
with like Final Fantasy Chronicles. I think that's what it like. Final Fantasy Anthology was one, and Chronicles. But my first experience with Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII, and I didn't know the franchise at all. I didn't know that the games weren't connected. Narratively. I just saw a commercial for Final Fantasy VII, and I don't know how old you are. I don't know if we're like in the same age group.
I'm 25. I'm
You're
25, so I'm
so,
a young guy.
so you're a full 10 years younger than I am.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
So I was 9 when Final Fantasy VII came out. So you were not born.
Right, right.
So there was this commercial, this series of commercials, and back then you didn't really see a lot of video game commercials. You only saw them unless they were for like very specific gaming franchises.
Right.
um, and so like there was this one commercial that would play where they would present it like it was a movie trailer, and
I think that rings a bell. I think I'm familiar with like the commercial that you're
yeah,
talking about.
there's like the voiceover, and they show clips from the game, and kind of like talk about certain things, and then it ends with the guy saying, and it's never coming to a theater near you, and then like PlayStation logo comes up, and that commercial sold me. I didn't know anything about the game, didn't know it was an RPG. Only had ever played one other RPG, which was Super Mario RPG,
Right.
for the Super Nintendo. But I mean, I knew that I had to play that game. Convinced my dad to, but between me and my brother, we had convinced our dad to buy us a PlayStation. And that year for Christmas, he bought us each like 4 games that we
Nice.
wanted. And Final Fantasy VII was technically my brother's game, uh,
Okay.
but it got the most play out of any of them between the two of us. I actually still have my copy of it It's like one of the only PS1 games like that I still have from my original like batch of them. But uh, that's one that like I hold on to because I don't want it to go anywhere.
Right, dude. I mean, so listen, you called Final Fantasy VII, if I'm not mistaken, your favorite video game of all time, dude. I would love if you could just like get into it a little bit because we mentioned this before we started the record, but Final Fantasy as a series is not one that I have gotten. I'm trying to think of a game that I played, maybe like 15. That's the one with the boys roll around the car,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I played like a little bit of them. Like I know the gist. I'm excited about 16. I mean the trailers look great for that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a series that I'm not familiar with. What what uh, what do you love so much about Final Fantasy 7?
The big thing for me is like it was the first game that had a very like it has a deep story. Not like deep like oh that's deep, but like although I do think that at times it gets into that, but like it's deep in the sense that it's like rich. There's a lot going on in that game and like it's very easy especially as a kid to think about video games as like there's like a basic story and then you just do the game in sections and those sections don't really like bleed over into each other but with like such a sprawling for the time for 1997 this big 3-disc game
Yep.
with like an open world and it I mean I guess it's not open like we think of today but it's like there you can go at some point in the game you can go anywhere you want within the game um and it there are no just sections. It kind of plays out in acts, like a film would, or like a novel would, and like there is the very basic story of like the objective of the main character, but then every single other character has their own story that ties into that main plot.
Right.
It really like I mean that playing that at 9, 10 years old whenever it came out. I mean, I it really changed the way I thought of what storytelling could be. Um, because it is so big and so epic, but it's also like very personal at times. You can tell that like the people who came up with the story were like working out things. And if you read into the history of the narrative and how it came about, I mean, that's exactly what it is. That's what they were doing. And I just think that I think it's so great.
Yeah, man. So like the one of the big things that I hear about a lot is and you touched on a little bit about the memorable characters. So I guess like in Seven specifically, like what are some of the characters that you would think maybe stand out to you? Personally, I'm just trying to see if I know enough about it to see if I know like the characters you're talking about. But yeah, so
I
like
mean,
what are some of your favorite characters?
so I think Cloud is like the one that everybody's going to think of first.
Gotcha.
He's the main character. His objective is the main objective, and you play as him for the majority of the game. There are times when you're not him, but yeah, I mean everything is kind of revolving around his revenge plot. But then like I think Barrett is really cool. Barrett's like he's a very imposing figure because he's like this big bulky dude who has a gun for an arm and like
Okay, so I did know Barrett. That's good. The gun.
Like he's got a gun for an arm. He's got tattoos. He's basically dressed like a military guy. He's got scars on his face, and he curses. It was like one of the first times I ever saw cursing in a video game. I thought that was
Right.
but like he curses. He's very rough around the edges, and like he is a domestic terrorist. Like that's what he is. He is like the head of a small group of people who are trying to sabotage and destroy a big corporation that they feel is destroying the planet. But then like when he gets around his daughter, he's like a big lovable goofball. And
Right.
so like you see the layers of that character, but there's also, like you kind of see why he's so rough and hardened around the edges once you actually get into his section of the story, because he's dealing with severe loss, and like these trying to get over these things that he wasn't able to achieve, and the failures that he had in his past, and now he's just trying to make up for it by making his adoptive daughter's life better in a world that doesn't really care about making the world better. uh,
Yeah.
and like, my favorite character in the whole game is the character Sid. um,
Not
Sid.
familiar.
You are familiar?
I'm not familiar. I
You're
hate
not?
to say
Okay.
it.
So Sid is like, I don't know if he's a drunk, because like I feel like it's heavily implied that he's like drinking a lot, but
Right.
I don't know, like it doesn't actually show him drinking, but he's like belligerent and angry throughout the game. He has like an assistant who he screams at, and he like curses at her, and he calls her stupid all the time. And like he comes off like this arrogant jerk throughout the whole game. And his whole thing is that like he wants to go to space, and he like was he was part of this space program that was going to launch a rocket into space for the first time, and he was all excited about it. But something happened, and his assistant like messed up something, and they couldn't launch, and so now he never gets to go to space, and he's forever like sad about it, and he's bitter. And it's really easy to like hate that character in the beginning, but then you get to like a flashback scene where he finds out that like he was wrong the whole time, and you get to see him soften up, and it's kind of like you get to. I actually wrote down notes for each of the characters here, because like
Nice.
I knew that we would eventually talk about this exact thing. Is like his whole story arc is just learning to let go of anger, and like soften up around this person who he thinks he hates.
Right.
you know and then there's like, I mean, you have a character like Tifa, and
Tifa,
Tifa
yeah.
is like one of the best characters in the game. Her whole thing is that she's just trying to be there for her friend, and like she's like not she's not like, I mean, she's like a badass woman, but she's not like, to me, like the stereotypical, like, oh, can't have any feelings, gotta bottle it up, I'm a tough
Right.
girl kind of thing. Like, no, she's like sensitive and open about how she feels. She's clearly dealing with her own trauma and issues. Everybody in the game is dealing with trauma. The whole game is about trauma, like when you
Right.
really boil it down. But like Tifa just wants to be there for her friends, and whatever that looks like, that's what she's doing. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's such, and again, like all of these characters' stories, everybody gets a little, a little like vignette almost.
Right.
Get to a certain point in the game, everybody gets their moment, and they all tie into the main narrative. So there's like the timeline, and then all the little sprawls,
Right.
everything coming off of it, which to me is like such. That's what real life is. I have my own timeline, but it has the little things coming off of it, and other people's lines are interacting with mine.
Yeah, man. So listen, let me ask you this though. When they came out with the remake, right? What are your very quickly? What are your thoughts on the remake? Did it hold up to like that same level that you remember the original?
I I love the remake.
Okay. Good.
It's
That's the one I was thinking about giving a try, just for like like same story, but getting the modern
But it's
gameplay and all that stuff.
the thing is, it's not the same. It's not the exact same story. It is
Okay.
different.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not like there are some people out there who are going to tell you it's like wildly different, and it's not. But it is different. And I think that you can totally play the remake without having played the first one, at least so far, because it only goes up to like a very small portion of the original game. But I think that your experience with the remake is absolutely enhanced by playing the original one.
Gotcha. Yeah. Nah,
But
cool,
yeah,
dude.
I love the remake. I pre-ordered it. I basically bought a PlayStation 4 when they announced that the remake was coming, because I kind of fell out of like, I don't really need to stay on top of video games at all. But then they announced that remake finally, and I was just like, all right, I'll do it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the day, I'm the kind of person now where like I'll play a video game for like an hour, maybe two at a time, and then I got to take a break and like give it a half hour, and then I'll come back, because my attention just starts to wane, or like I feel anxious, like I got to go do something else.
Right.
The day I got Final Fantasy VII Remake, I played it for 12 hours nonstop. I like 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. I did not stop. I didn't use the bathroom. I didn't eat. Nothing. I was
You're just a gamer, dude.
I was glued to it.
That's awesome. I mean, we all need one of those days every once in a while. You know what I mean? Take us back to the good old days when we didn't have.
Especially during COVID, when like
Yeah.
this was April of 2020,
Right.
so like there was nothing to do.
Yeah. So okay, so besides Final Fantasy, right? One of the other questions I asked you was what were some other game franchises you really love? I don't know, maybe you do me like two, maybe like two of your next favorite game franchises.
I think probably the big one for me, outside of Final Fantasy, was the Resident Evil series.
Gotcha.
And I'm such a sucker for a game that can scare me, which is weird because I don't really like horror movies that much.
Okay.
Or like a lot of horror media. It kind of like depends on what it is for sure. But like, Resident Evil 2, the original one, I played that when I was like 9, 10 years old. Definitely,
Wow, yeah.
probably shouldn't have been, but I loved it. It scared the hell out of me, and I thought it was great. Like the gameplay loop of like solving puzzles, managing your inventory. I thought that was great. Eventually like got the director's cut of the original one, played that a bunch. I mean, I've played every mainline Resident Evil game except for two of them. 5 and 6 I never had any interest in. Once 4 hit, I played 4 and I was just like, this isn't what I want from Resident Evil anymore, and that's okay. It's kind of like I'm gonna move on.
Right, and then they lean harder into it for 5 and 6, and it's like a crazy action.
Yeah, and
Action game,
I was
yeah.
never interested in that. But then I heard that 7 returned it, like, was scary, and then I bought 7 once it like was heavily discounted. And I think that's the scariest game I've ever played. And I love it. It's so good. I've since played like 2 remake, 3 remake. I just finished 4 remake a couple weeks
Nice.
ago. And, I've played Village. Like I'm all in on Resident Evil again.
Nice, dude. That's great. So like they came back to their senses almost and started to going back to their roots, and
Yeah.
that's cool that you fell back into
Eight
love with it.
was a little action heavy.
I gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
I think I like what they did with the 4 remake and made it spooky again.
Right.
Because it's not as spooky, but it's spooky.
Nice, dude. So Resident Evil is a franchise that a little more than Final Fantasy. Like I played 2 remake, 3 remake. I haven't played 4 remake yet. I think the remakes are such a great idea because yeah, I mean there's no way I'm going back and playing the old ones in 2023.
I
So I'm
mean,
glad they're rebooting them. But
I'm not, which is like, it's funny that I'm doing this podcast with you because like I'm not a big like nostalgia guy. I kind of like, I think that nostalgia is really just like, it's a marketing scheme. That's all it is. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, why make something new when we can give you what you've already had? But
Totally.
but So like movie remakes, I'm not super
Right,
excited
right.
about them. Or like when they do a sequel many years later to something, like generally I'm probably not going to care about it. But video games are such an interest, like, because I do feel like the remaking of a video game is justified because, like, with the way that technology has changed and just the culture around video games has
Yeah,
changed, like the Resident Evil remakes are serious.
right.
When in the past, it was presented as serious, but it was so campy and super goofy. And so, like, now they get a chance to go, okay, well, what if we did that by today's standards? And I think that it's such a cool idea.
Yeah, and they've to me that's kind of like the blueprint of like maybe how remakes should be handled, right? Like it's got the same kind of spirit, but then
Yeah.
yeah,
That's,
all
I mean,
the stuff that yeah didn't age well, just get it out of there, right? And
that's what I love about the Final Fantasy VII remake too, is that I
right.
think it does a lot of that, while also expanding on stuff that from the original game.
Yeah. So I guess what would you say is like your next favorite franchise right after that one?
I'd probably go Metal Gear, honestly.
Okay.
There's a lot that there are a lot that I could say, but like I think the Metal Gear franchise, just in general, is really cool. How I mean, specifically like the Solid games,
Right.
how they've messed around with like what video game narration can do.
Right.
How like it's so cool to me that it was cool to me then that uh have you played Metal Gear Solid, the original one?
I've dabbled in Metal Gear. Yeah. I just saw it, and as we're recording today, they announced the remake of
Remake of
Snake Eater.
3,
Yep.
yeah. I'm interested in that. So like the original Metal Gear Solid, it's so cool. There's this part where, like, you have your codec and you got to like hit the frequencies to talk to certain people to get, like, to progress the story or to get hints on the game or whatever.
Right.
There's one part where the Colonel Campbell, is talking to Snake, and he's like, "Snake, you need to find my niece Meryl's codec number. Look around for it." And you can look everywhere in the game, and you're not gonna find it because it's not there. And then eventually, he just gives up and tells you, "Snake, if you look at the back of the jewel case for the video game, you'll find it." Because
Right.
it's like encouraging you to puzzle solve outside
Right.
of.
It's breaking that fourth wall. I
Yeah,
mean, Kojima is just such a nutcase,
I
man.
know,
He's
and
always
like
doing stuff like that.
I I I have Death Stranding, didn't finish it, didn't get very far into it, because I just kind of feel like maybe the game itself is not for me. But
Right.
the concept of the game is bananas to me, and I think it's
Yeah.
so smart.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's one of those that as Snake Eater is coming out, I played a lot of five, and I really liked five a lot. But yeah, I really haven't gone back to the old Metal Gears. But I mean, same thing with Resident Evil. If they're remaking Snake Eater, dude, I'm all over it. Like,
Yeah,
that
I
sounds like
mean, Snake
yeah,
Eater's Snake Eater's the one that I really didn't play much of at all. I don't know why, but for some reason I just never got very far in the game. So like I was excited when I saw that today because they're like doing all the original voice acting,
right.
and just updating the graphics and the gameplay essentially. So I'm just like, cool. I'm on board with that. Story doesn't change, just makes it more of a modern game.
Yeah, dude. All right, so final question as we close out this episode of Memory Card. Um, maybe if you could give me a memory. It doesn't have to be the one you wrote in with about the forum. If you got another one in mind or whatever, but not
Dude,
to put you on the spot, but
I have so many memories of Final Fantasy VII.
yep.
I mean, like I have so many. I mean, like I'll give you small ones, and then I'm gonna give you the one from the forum.
All right,
Um,
yeah, yeah, that works.
so, I
Totally.
mean, like I remember like when I went into the fifth grade, I played Final Fantasy VII when I was in the fourth grade, and
Okay.
then I was still playing it into the fifth grade. And I remember one day a kid at my school had the game, and he was like borrowing it from another kid and taking it home, and but
Right.
he had it, and I was just like, oh, I love that game. And he was just like, yeah, I played a little bit of it, but not very much. And then like I talked to him about Final Fantasy VII maybe for 3 weeks straight.
Nice.
And that was how I found out that not everybody was obsessed with everything they liked. Um, I found that was how I found out that like people just can kind of like things
Right,
and
right,
not just
right.
go all in on them. Because like when I like something, especially when I was younger, when I like something, I really like it, and like I got to know everything about it. I need to like I need to be like exploring every possible like tidbit of information that I can find about it, and that was hard to do in 1998. So I was like buying every magazine that had anything about Final Fantasy in it, and I remember that. I remember that very, very well. Just the feeling of like, oh, so you aren't like obsessed with this. And when I say obsessed, I mean I was obsessed with it. Let's go back a year, fourth grade, when like I don't know if you had this when you were in school, but I had like workbooks that were like, they basically had worksheets for whatever
Right.
content
Okay.
area,
Yeah.
in elementary school, and you do the work on them, you tear it out, you turn it in. I went through the workbook. This is so embarrassing. I went through the workbook, and on the name portion, I divided it evenly so that I could write the name of every main character, like on 10 pages each, and then I would switch, and I went through the whole book and did that ahead of time, and then like tried to write as if I was that character. So
Nice. So you're like, okay, yeah.
so like Cloud was just like my handwriting. Barrett, since he's like tougher, he had like really jagged handwriting. Um,
Nice. Yeah. I mean, the metal arm is hard for him. He's a righty
right,
too.
yeah,
It's
he's
hard
writing with
for
his left hand. Aerith, well, she was Eris for me because I got one of the ones where her name was translated wrong. Uh,
Oh, nice. Yep.
but Eris, the I had a little heart above it, like and my teacher was always so confused about what I was doing and why I was putting all these weird names that weren't mine on my assignments, but I refused to change it. Um, but like the memory that I gave you actually wasn't about Final Fantasy VII. It was related to it because it was about Final Fantasy VIII.
Right.
In eight, if you probably don't remember, but
Right.
uh, 8 came out in North America September 9th, 1999. I remember that because it was the same day the Dreamcast was released.
Okay. Yep.
And I, a few months before, like went to a KB Toys, a company that doesn't exist anymore
Right.
because of Mitt Romney. But I went to KB Toys, and that was like the first pre-order I ever did. And so like I would get my mom to drive me to the mall every couple of weeks to this KB Toys, and I would put a few more dollars down on, like I would get an allowance. I would take that allowance
Right.
straight there and just put it down. And so when it came out, video games used to come out on Thursdays. They don't anymore. Now it's Fridays, but video games used to come out on Thursdays, and it was September 9th, 1999, 9999.
All right.
I had to wait until the next day, the Friday, for my mom to take me to that mall to get my copy of the game. But it came with a strategy guide for pre-ordering it,
Nice.
so I was excited about that. And then I had to wait until the next day when I went to my dad's house, because that's where the PlayStation was, to be able to play the game. So I stayed up super late that night just reading through the strategy guide. And I had no real context for what I was reading because I didn't know the
Right.
story. I didn't know like how the battle system worked. I didn't know I didn't know this stuff. So I was just reading it. I mean, I I basically read it cover to cover, which is a weird way to read a strategy guide.
Right, I was gonna
Like,
say.
like you get to the page that you're on in the game, and then and so like it's not like reading a book. It's not telling you the story. It's just telling you like here's how you beat this boss. You know,
Right.
here's how you solve this puzzle. And I mean to the point where the next day when I finally got to get to my dad's house and put on the game and play it, didn't play a demo ahead of time. The demo came with Brave Fencer Musashi, if I remember correctly. Um, didn't play that demo at all. Wanted to go in totally blind.
Right.
And I mean, like, from the moment the music hit, uh, the like getting into like the opening cinematic, getting into the actual game, and finally being able to play it, it was like it was brand new for sure, but it was still very familiar because I had read that strategy guide so in
Right.
depth that like there was I at least knew something about that game. And to this day, I mean, the music to uh, the first place you're in the game, Balam Garden, is like the music. Even the first time I heard it, was giving me like this nostalgic feeling, and that has stayed with
Right.
me my entire life. A few years back, I replayed Final Fantasy VIII, and I mean, it just like I heard that music, and I was just like, oh, I'm, you know, 11 years old again, playing this for the first time, like at my dad's house on a Saturday afternoon, and I remember like it's sunny outside, but then it's gonna rain later, and so it was like the perfect day to be stuck inside playing a video game.
Yep.
And
Absolutely, man.
yeah, and I remember that so vividly. And I've gone. I mean, like they do like the Final Fantasy concerts, where
Yep.
like the symphony in your town will play the music of Final Fantasy, and they play like clips from the game.
Yeah.
I've gone to two of those.
Nice.
I went to the first one that was ever in North America, that I know of anyway, in like 2003 or four, something like that. Dear Friends. I went to that one in Chicago, and the composer, Nobuo Uematsu, was there.
Right.
And it was like the first time he had really made like a public appearance, as
Right.
like the guy who composed the Final Fantasy music, and he performed with them. He conducted them for a couple songs, and just like, yeah, I mean, it was very cool to be like, oh, that guy shaped my childhood, and he's in the same room as me.
Yeah, before, so you said 2003, right? So before even like the internet and all that stuff, obviously, right? Before you even like really knew what the guy looked like, maybe, and
I had
that's
known what
crazy.
he looked like because I was when I say like I was obsessed, I was scrolling, GeoCities and Angel Fires, fan websites on my dial-up internet to learn anything I could about Final Fantasy, including like what Uematsu looked like.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I was very familiar with him by the time, and then like I remember too. Oh, this is a different. Sorry, this is a different time. The next time I went to Chicago, we ended up in Chinatown, before we left, and there was a little store there, that just had like knickknacks. It was, I mean, they had everything from like cookware to pornography. And
Yep. Everything.
and as we were walking out, I remember I saw on a shelf behind the counter, and I was just like, "What is that?" Because I can't read Japanese, but I recognized the look. It was the CD Final Fantasy VII soundtrack, and I was
Nice.
just like, "I have to buy it," and I still have that. It's another thing. Like I'm never gonna part with that because I used to drive around in my car to my then girlfriend's chagrin, listening to beat boop music from a video game that came out in 1997 because I loved the way that it made me feel. this is another true story, and I'm sorry that I'm like elongating this, but
No, this is great, dude. I love it.
I remember I was seeing this girl, and I had really strong feelings for her, like really strong. And I was just like, I remember having a conversation with her and just being like, "Oh yeah, like I got it bad for you. Like I'm deeply in love with you." And she was like a closed off person, and she was just like, "How do you know that? How do you know that what you feel is love?" And it's such a dorky thing, especially for an adult to do. But the only way that I could explain it is I put on the Final Fantasy VII main theme, and I was just like, I know that I'm in love with you because you make me feel the way this song does. And
Wow.
and she didn't get it, and we broke up sometime later.
I think it's beautiful. If you said that to me, Drew, I would have got it. I think it's beautiful.
And it was like, yeah, that was the only way that like I could explain those feelings that I had. And it's like it sounds like it's just a line, but it's not. That's totally true for me. Like I know what that feels like because I felt it when I was a kid playing a video game about blonde guys with spiky hair and dudes with gun arms.
Yeah, dude. Listen, I love that. And I think that's a great place to end this episode of Memory Card. Dude, your love of Final Fantasy is so infectious, man. I'm ready to get into it. I think maybe 16. I'm gonna give it a try. 16 when it
I'm
comes
definitely gonna
out.
play 16. I'm replaying 10 now, like,
Gotcha.
which I never finished 10, so I'm playing it for the first time since 2002. I don't have anything to do at work right now. I'm just going in. Like all my kids are graduated, so I'm just
Oh,
going
yep.
in to get my contract hours, and I'm doing nothing. I took my PS5 into work today to play Final Fantasy X all day. Forgot the controller.
Oh, there you go. The controller. That's the one. We always forget the
I
controller.
packed it up real quick this morning. Forgot to grab the controller, so I didn't get to do that. But tomorrow is a new day.
Yeah, dude. I was gonna say, hopefully you get to that soon, man. But no, listen. I think this was a great episode of Memory Card. Thank you so much for coming on,
Dude, thanks for letting
Drew.
me. I got when you
Yeah.
mentioned it before, I was just like, don't you ever let anybody besides me come on to talk about Final Fantasy VII.
No, dude, I knew it. I knew it. We had to get you on like first. That way, if anybody else talks about it, Drew already beat everybody to it. He talked about Final Fantasy first. It's great. But no,
If somebody else on the show starts talking about it, I'm gonna hear it, and I'm just gonna like show up in the video.
it's like, hey, I want to talk about it too. Yeah, that's great. Nah, dude, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, but I don't know where can people find out your stuff, or do you got anything in the works that you want to give extra shout out to? Of course, it'll be in the description.
Yeah,
As
I mean,
always.
the only thing again, Justice League Cosmic Chaos, play it. I'm really proud of it. I love what we did. I do not make, I already got paid. I don't make a dime off of you buying it. So this is not a sales pitch. This is just, I made something that I really like, and I want you to play it. I want people to experience it. So,
Man.
yeah, it's on all the consoles, every console you can think of, it's on. As long as it still exists, I guess. Maybe we'll get those retro demakes someday.
Yep.
But yeah, consoles, Steam, play it. I think it's on sale right now. I think it's like $37. So go do it. You can find me on TikTok talking about DC Comics stuff at Drew X Deficit. Twitter, same place. Mostly I just complain on Twitter. Or I have just like passing thoughts that I, just got to put them somewhere.
That's what it's for,
And Instagram, taking, uploading pictures when I get a haircut. Yeah, that's where you find me. All Drew X Deficit. I'll be there.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Drew, for coming on. That's
Hey.
been Memory Card, episode number 3.